Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you a recommendation video for books that are perfect to read this time of year. These are books that would work well anytime in the fall, but specifically in October around Halloween. And I know for a lot of you, this is the time of year that you suddenly start craving horror books. You know, I've said it so many times that I do read horror all year round, but even myself, I really do get pulled into the season and I find myself craving just horror books, scary books, books that feel spooky and witchy, and I basically want to read nothing but horror. So I wanted to share with you some of the books that I personally love that I feel have those seasonal feels to them. And these are my personal recommendations, so it's not an exhaustive list of all the horror books that have Halloween themes. So if you're watching this and you're noticing something that is missing, that's pretty common. It either means that I haven't read it myself, or more likely it's just not a personal favorite of mine. All that being said, I think I have a really good variety here in terms of format and age categories, so let's get started. First, I want to recommend a novella, and that is Halloween Fiend by C.V. Hunt. And just from the title and the cover, you can probably see why I want to include it on this list. This is set in a town called Strange that is haunted every night by a creature that calls himself Halloween. He goes door to door getting the treats that the people leave for him on their doorsteps. And if he doesn't get them, well, he is possibly going to do some tricks. And this book is just all Halloween all the time, and I definitely think that it works perfect for this time of year. Because it's a novella, you could easily read it in one sitting on one day, so this might be one to save for Halloween night itself. And I always want to mention when I talk about this book that there is harm to small animals, because when I'm talking about the people leaving treats on their doorsteps, I'm not talking about chocolate bars. They are leaving their small pets like rabbits. So if you are uncomfortable with a creature going around and taking them and, well, eating them, this may not be for you. But if you can handle this one, it's gripping and gruesome and dark and definitely has those spooky feels. Again, it's very short, so you will fly through it, but I think that it's just hits the nail on the head for if you're looking for a Halloween read. It is produced by the publisher Grindhouse, so it's definitely adult, and I think that it will appeal to anyone who is looking for a dark, creepy read. Next, I want to recommend a few short story collections, and I know not everyone is a fan of that format, but trust me, I think it would be really fun to read a short story every night in the days leading up to Halloween, and I have some really good collections here that once again really capture the holidays. The first one I have to mention is Autumncrow by Chaney, and this is about a town where every day is Halloween, and within this collection there are 8 stories that do feature the holiday, and some of the stories are more Halloween-y than others. The 2 that I think really stood out to me as favorites that also really captured the theme of the season were Burnt Brownies as well as Crypt TV. Both of them are kind of about kids going around and making trouble, and I think the author did a really good job of capturing just kids being kids. And at the same time, these books are very much centered around Halloween, and you really get those good feels. This book also includes stories that are much more focused on the emotional side of things. The author definitely enjoys bringing in a lot of heart to his stories. And while this is definitely meant for adults, I do think this book has a lot of all ages appeal. So if you have a child that's maybe 10, 12, you could certainly read some of these stories aloud to them around like a fire. And I think this would be a really nice way to celebrate the holiday. It's the kind of short story collection I could see myself rereading year and year again. So it's definitely going to be a favorite on my list every year. And if you're looking for even more short stories, I would also recommend At the Cemetery Gates by John Brhel and Joseph Sullivan. This one is not specifically Halloween focused, but there's one story in there that really jumped out at me when I was compiling this list. It is called The Spice of Life and follows a woman that is trying to lose weight. She goes into the mall and it's around Halloween and she sees that a new shop has opened up, and it's basically a Wiccan store that sells different specialty teas, and so she purchases one that is hopefully supposed to help her to lose weight. However, this is definitely a horror story, so it doesn't go quite as planned, and I found the story to be just devastating. And because because of the themes around Halloween. I believe it's kind of like a chai-like spiced tea. It really played into the holiday well. And you can just see from the cover, these authors love the holiday and love writing little spooky stories. So all the stories in this collection are quite short. You could read them easily in just one sitting. Some short stories in other collections can be like 30, 40 pages, but I think all of these kind of run around like the 10 to 15 mark. So you can easily pick one up even if you don't have a lot of time on your hands. And I do recommend the whole collection. Technically, this is volume 2. You don't need to read volume 1 first because, again, it's short stories, so they're not interconnected. But this just happened to be the one I read, and it definitely had a good Halloween-y story in there. Now, I also want to recommend some graphic novels. The first one I want to talk about is Harrow County by Cullen Bunn, and this is a Southern Gothic story that isn't specifically set around Halloween, but it definitely has those autumn feels. At the beginning of the story, this town is trying to just kill a witch that they have found in their community. At first they try to hang her, but that doesn't work, and eventually they burn her. As always happens in these stories, the witch curses the town and says that she is going to come back in some way in the future. Now, fast forward, we are following from the perspective of a young teenage girl that has just turned 18. And in this town, the people are afraid of the women as they come of age because they fear that they will become the reincarnation of this witch. And well, wouldn't you know, this young woman possibly does develop some supernatural powers and has to deal with that. Now, I have to mention the artwork in this book is absolutely beautiful. It's done in a watercolor style with colors that are just reminiscent of autumn, like oranges and browns. And it's just, like I said, very Halloween-y. As soon as you have a witch involved in the story, I always think that it's perfect for this time of year. And this is just the first volume of a story that goes on. Admittedly, I have not finished the collection, but maybe I'll finally get to it this October myself. So definitely one I recommend. The other graphic novel I want to recommend is Afterlife with Archie. And yes, this takes place in the iconic town of Riverdale, and it is part of the Archie Andrews franchise. But hear me out, despite all that, this book is actually legitimately scary. It starts out with Jughead rushing to the door of Sabrina the Witch because his dog Hot Dog was hit by a car and killed. And so he comes to her door begging her and her family to bring his dog back to life. The aunts say that they cannot do it, it is forbidden, and that he is dead and gone and there is nothing they can do. However, Sabrina takes pity on Jughead and agrees to secretly help him, and so they perform a forbidden ceremony to try to bring Hot Dog back to life. They are somewhat successful, but what they bring back to life is not Hot Dog in his usual form, but more a demonic zombie-like version of him. And from there, Jughead realizes that things have gone terribly wrong when his dog begins attacking people. This book takes place on Halloween because the town is celebrating with a Halloween party at the school, and so everyone is dressed up in costume. And wouldn't you know, people start to get bitten, and it definitely turns into a bit of a zombie story. And despite, again, being part of the Archie franchise, which is kind of known for being very campy, this book I thought was actually quite scary. I thought the character development was really well done. The artwork is beautiful. It's done in a lot of rich oranges and purples and just fit the story very well. And I really think that all of the Archie comics that are part of their horror line are just very well done, but this one in particular really focuses around Halloween, so I thought it would be a perfect one to pick up this month and would definitely recommend it. It was a lot of fun, but at the same time, a legitimately good horror graphic novel. And if you are willing to try some middle grade, I have to recommend Small Spaces by Katherine Arden. And this follows a young, precocious bookworm that is very smart. And at the beginning of the story, she finds a book and starts to read it. She reads about these characters and this particularly creepy man called the Smiling Man. At first she thinks it's fiction. However, when her class goes on a field trip to a farm, she discovers the gravesite of the people in her book. And so she begins to wonder that if the characters are real, possibly the Smiling Man, this creepy creature, is also real as well. And this book just has all of the autumn, fall, creepy feels. It involves mazes and scarecrows and all the things that just make you think of this time of year. And at the same time, as you would expect from a really well-written middle grade, it has beautiful ideas about friendship and family. You get to see these characters banding together and fighting the evil thing. And I think a lot of adult readers are afraid to try middle grade because they think that it's going to be too young for them. But this is definitely one with a lot of all ages appeal. Don't get me wrong, if you do have a young person to read this book to, this would be perfect. But I read this one as an adult and it totally held up and still had some pretty creepy moments. So yeah, don't give middle grade a bad rap because it definitely holds up on its own, and I would definitely recommend this one. It was just a fantastic story with a lot of positive messages, but also a lot of creepy scarecrows. So definitely one to check out. And for a young adult horror recommendation, I want to go with The Last Harvest by Kim Liggett. And this story starts out with the main character going into the barn and finding his father bleeding out on the floor. His father has been going crazy over the last few weeks. They think that he might be schizophrenic. And now he is dying, and he whispers to his son that he pleads the blood and then proceeds to die. And the story follows the son who used to be a star football player, but he had to give that up because now he's responsible for harvesting his family's fields and taking care of his family and becoming the man of the house. This story is, as you can expect from all of the things in that synopsis, a perfect book to read in the fall months. It's not specifically set around Halloween, but like I said, when you're talking about harvesting and football, this book definitely made me want to pick it up every single autumn. And just from the cover alone, you can see that it definitely has those autumn colors there. And I really enjoyed this story. It definitely had some creepy moments to it. This, I understand, would be considered folk horror. It definitely has some possible cult aspects to it, which is something I really enjoy. And at the same time, it almost has a slasher feel to it because as the story proceeds, certain characters start to die off and you're left wondering what is going on. At the beginning of the story, the main character runs over a golden calf that he sees and is definitely left wondering if he, like his father, is going crazy or if there's truly something else going on. And I love the mystery in this one. It's very atmospheric and it definitely left me guessing. It is young adult, so I do want to mention that there is some romance or at least a love interest in this book, which at times took a little bit more of a front seat than I personally would have liked. But despite that, this is again a book that I personally want to reread. Maybe I'll do it this month. I've got too many things on my TBR already, but it's definitely a book that is calling to me right now. So if you haven't read it, if you're open to reading a young adult book, this would be a great one to read. It's fairly short, so again, you can fly through it and hopefully you can sneak it on to your own TBR this month. Finally, I want to recommend a proper adult horror novel for all of you that are looking for something truly scary because this book is definitely disturbing. The book I want to talk about is Tatterdemon by Steve Vernon. And this story is set primarily in the present day, but first we go back several hundred years where the town is trying to kill a witch. And when they do, they bury her in a field, but before she dies, she warns them that of course she's going to curse them and all of those good things. And the land that they bury her in is possibly going to be cursed as well. Now, fast forward to the present day, we follow multiple perspectives, but primarily a woman named Maddie, who is living with a very ugly and abusive husband. And at the beginning of the story, it becomes too much for her and she decides to kill him with a skillet. From there, she buries him in the field and she thinks that things are all said and done. However, he begins to rise from the dead and he shows up as what he calls a tatterdemon, which is a demonic creature that happens to look like a scarecrow. And this book is just fantastic. I believe it's actually primarily set around Easter, and so it has a lot of those resurrection themes, but given everything I've just told you, I think you can understand why I'm including it in a Halloween recommendation video. And I gotta give you warning that this book is very dark and disturbing. There are content warnings for abuse, sexual and otherwise, including rape on the page. So this is not for everyone. I can't blindly recommend this to my entire audience, but if you are comfortable with some really dark and disturbing subject matter, this might be one to check out, especially for those of you that are really craving a book that might actually scare you, because it was very intense. Now, I did say in my initial review when I first talked about this book that this author definitely reminded me of Stephen King, and I would still say that is true because this book definitely has a lot of the things that I see in Stephen King's storytelling. So if you are someone who has already read through a lot of his collection, love Stephen King's work, and are looking for an author that's going to give you a similar feel, a longer story that is very character focused and dark and weird and all those things, this might be one you will really enjoy. It's definitely one of the most intense books that I have read, and definitely the most intense book on this personal list. So again, if you're looking for something that is definitely going to push the limit, I would personally recommend trying this one for yourself. So that is it for this video. As always, I would love to know if I've added anything to your own October TBR. And I would also like for you to comment down below and recommend your favorite horror book that is perfect to read around Halloween, whether or not it's strictly a Halloween book or just gives you those spooky, witchy feels. I would love to hear from all of you because I have not read all the books and I definitely enjoy your recommendations. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror as well as some science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, all of that. And if you're already subscribed, help me out by sharing this video online, as well as giving it a thumbs up, hitting that notification bell, and dropping me a comment. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.